ball going back and forth in a line from you to me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another video in my Apollo Moon Hoax series. I know it's been about 3 or 4 months since I put out a video. Well, there's a reason for that. I think a very good reason. We have been quite busy. My guest and I here, who I'm going to introduce in a second, and we collaborated on a book together. And the book is the Apollo, The Real Mission. This is, by the way, the not for sale copy. The other copies are now coming. So very proud of this book, and it's actually fiction, and we're going to explain why we wrote it in fiction form. But before we get into all of that, I would like to introduce my guest, and you actually have already an introduction to her with the intro music to this video. And that is Robin Landry. Robin, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
Well, I'm really happy to, that you are here. And you know what? I was really, I never thought in a million years that I would write a book on fiction. Because it requires a lot of skill and, you know, there's a lot of character development. You got to build those characters. And I just like to let the audience know, let the viewer know how this actually came about. And I'm going to give a little bit of history. Actually, Robin and I have known each other now for probably 4 or 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And we developed a relationship online. Robin actually wrote a review of my first 2 books. She was a top 500 Amazon reviewer. And I just happened to be part of an email group at the time. And one of the people in that group actually knows Robin, and I had mentioned her. And I said, can you thank her for me for the review, and maybe you can put me in touch with her. And that's exactly what happened. And Robin and I connected online about 4 or 5 years ago, and we developed a pretty good friendship. And then about a year or so ago, I don't know, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong,
about a year.
About a year, yeah. You approached me about the possibility of writing a book. And why don't you explain explain how that happened, how you got that idea? Because this actually is Robin's idea. And I was a little bit reluctant at first, but Robin won me over. And Robin, can you explain how you came up with that idea?
Well, I like the idea of the Da Vinci Code, the way they used so much actual facts in it and built a suspense story around it. And you have all the expertise in the actual factual parts, which I don't. So I said, why don't you do it in a journal form that my characters find, and it goes from there. So, of course, being that it's suspense, you have a lot of people chasing you, and we don't know how it's going to end. So you took over the hard part, the heavy lifting with the facts, and I just played around and made a story.
Well, you know what? When you talk about the heavy part, the hard part, that's really subjective, isn't it? Because I actually thought you had the hard part, but and this is what was really fascinating about this concept, is because when Robin approached me, as I said earlier, I never thought I'd write a book on fiction, but then the more I got to thinking about it, the more I realized that it would give us so many opportunities to go into so many other areas in the book, which is really what we did. And I really didn't know how we were going to do, but Robin came up with the concept. She actually developed a lot of the characters in the book. And she wrote me a draft and sent it to me, and I really liked it. And then she suggested, you know, maybe we could, in the book, we can write the book around the journal. And the journal happens to be from a retired astronaut who, I don't want to give too much away, but a retired astronaut in his later years today. And he reveals, just before he passes, he reveals that there's a journal out there. And so I immediately fell in love with the idea, Robin. I really, the the way you came out with this sort of the whole structure, yeah, I got some technical expertise on that, but you had to weave the story around that, and you found a way to make it work. And I have to be honest with you, I did read one of Robin's books because I wanted to get an idea of her style. And you are a brilliant fictional writer. I just don't know how, when it comes to fiction, that it's a very difficult thing to do. I write, I've written 2 books myself, but um, the challenge when you're writing fiction is because now you have to get into other people's minds and how would they think and how would they react in these different scenarios and chase scenes, and there's all kinds of mystery in the book, and it's got all the ingredients in it. And at the same time, we tried to stay as close to the not the truth, but based on a true story. We did change all the names of the characters to avoid any conflict. And Robin and I actually went back and forth on that, and we decided to change all the names and the characters. We stuck with the historical figures, like in the book we mentioned President Kennedy. We kept him in there because that's okay. I've seen fiction books written on President Kennedy. So, and we kept the Apollo moon missions, and we wanted to get us as close to reality, but in fiction form. And so it's just interesting. Robin, you come from the point of view, though, and this is what I find really amazing. You come from the point of view, as you just said earlier, that you never looked at the technical aspect of this, and that's how you based your character. Can you elaborate more on that?
On not using the technology?
Yeah, like from the point of view of a character who stumbles on this by accident without giving too much away, and how you built up that character. Like to me, the way you wrote that character reminds me of people who really never looked into this. And then when you hear it the first time, they say, no, Randy, no, that's not true. But your character starts to find out that there may be something to this, and she starts looking online and starts getting some information. And so maybe you can just talk it from that point of view, from a skeptic point of view.
Well, I probably am a skeptic because I haven't looked into it whatsoever, except for your books and reading them, and they were interesting, but I don't know the technology enough to say for sure whether I believe it or not. It doesn't, but that doesn't matter. So I could become the character who's exploring it and wondering. So that's how I write. Like, just get into the character and say, well, what if? And then if I say, what if this is a hoax, why? I like to ask, whose motivation, and why would they fool us like this? That's what's interesting to me, the why.
And that's really the crux of it, isn't it? Why? And I mean, it's very interesting that you say that, because a lot of people will immediately shy away from. In fact, the other day I was on a train, and I was heading into back and forth from Toronto, actually, and I just happened to be reading my second book, making notes for an upcoming interview, and he's an elderly man. I think he was probably in his 80s. He was sitting there with his wife, and he looked at me and he said, "You're reading a book." And I was a little startled by that, and I said, "Yes, I'm reading a book." And he says, "Well, everybody always reads their phones. I never see anybody on here reading a book." And I said, he said, "Can I see it?" So I gave him the book. Of course, I had to tell him, well, I wrote it, right? Because he looked at me and he said, "This is you." So he came from that point of view that you're talking about. He said, "Well, I don't believe any of this." And I said, "I understand." He says, and then he looked at the book and said, no, there's too much technical stuff in here. It's too detailed. I can't be bothered. And it told me a lot. And this is what you were basically talking about. It told me a lot, is that I said to him, I said, well, it's not that technical. I mean, anybody can read this book if they put their mind to it, or a book like it, if they put their mind to it. If you want to know the truth, if you want to get at the truth, if you're suspicious about it not being correct, then the devil is in the details, as the old saying goes. And I said to him, I said, you're definitely entitled to your opinion, but if you really wanted to know, if you were driven to maybe find out more about it. So he had that, exactly what you're talking about in terms of the character. He said, well, I don't have the technical expertise. I'm not a rocket scientist. I don't have that technical expertise, but I have an inquisitive mind, and so do you, Robin. And I found out later that he does too. This individual on the train, he just needed to be maybe not so much convinced, but that, you know what, there's no harm in just looking at it and checking it out and seeing if what they're telling you is right. And that's how the characters developed in the book. Is that I know there's a couple of scenes in the book where, you know, they're reading the journal, and your character, the one, your lead character, who I like, who I think is you actually, based on you, right? She's saying, no, I don't believe this. Nobody's going to believe this, right? And I don't want to give that other part away, but she ends up slowly starts to turn around, and she starts, you know, scratching her head going, whoa, whoa, wait a minute, maybe there's something going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And that led into many other aspects of the book. Robin, I didn't realize when we wrote this book, and I want you to expand on this, the rabbit holes that we went down, because that really led in many different directions. Is this what you anticipated, or did it just happen by accident?
This is just how my mind works. I don't care about details. I care about big picture. So if someone says you didn't get that detail right, how can you think that we actually did something? And I say, I don't care. I see the big picture and why. I love the why part of everything. The who, what, where, when, and why. I concentrate on why. Because that to
And
me
that, go
is
ahead.
fascinating.
You know what? And that's, I think, what made the chemistry work between us and this book, is that you're asking why, but I'm asking why, but then I want to know how.
Right.
And that, yeah, I'm the how and you're the why.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me a chance to explain in the book how they faked the Apollo moon missions. And then it also gave me the chance, you know, from reading your characters, because, you know, they're going back and forth and they're being chased, and, you know, there's some serious stuff going on, and their lives are in danger because the powerful forces know that they have this journal, and this journal is threatening to them, and they need to retrieve that journal at all costs, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. But it's a little more difficult to do that in this day and age of the internet, because information, once it gets out there, you can't stop it. Once it's out, it's out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no stopping it. So that led Robin and I actually to go down many other rabbit holes, and I didn't realize it just sort of happened organically. I didn't plan it, right? I was just, when I started writing the journal, and I would read you would send me a draft. So you'd send me a few chapters, and I would, you know, okay, where's the best place to put this journal in, to start this journal? And I was able to, the way you were writing, and it was like I was talking to my family and my friends, and I'm trying to tell them over the years that, you know, all's not what it seems out there. It's just not. And the Apollo moon missions is the Apollo moon missions rather are the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's going on. And Robin, that leads into some of your work. For those of you, of course, you wouldn't know this, but Robin also does much more research. And I'd like her to talk a little bit about that, because that comes out in the book a bit. And Robin, that gave you an opportunity to go down some rabbit holes as well. And a great thing about this is that it's in fiction form. We don't need to show sources. We can speculate a little bit, but speculate based on true events. Am I right?
Right. So I think the most important part of writing and fiction is it asks a question, and it prompts other people to start questioning. You don't want to tell people because that says you're an authority. I want to say, hey, look over here. Why did this happen? What do you think? So I'm allowed to do that as a fiction writer. If I'm a nonfiction writer, I'm telling. I don't want to tell, because I might not know everything. I know a tiny sliver of what I know, but if I open up the conversation, people, that's what's good about social media, because people can answer you and you get all walks of life.
Exactly. And we're by no means comparing our book to Dan Brown's book or anything like that. Dan Brown's a brilliant writer. What we're saying is that we were inspired, in part, Robin was inspired by writers like him to pursue this. And when I was reading, Robin, when I was reading your text over the last year, I mean, it actually was opening my eyes to some new possibilities as well, because I've been stuck, with the technical aspect of this for a long time, for many years, trying to learn it, because there's a lot of science and technical stuff in it, and I really had to sort of I had to sidebar this to jump into the other stuff, to learn a little bit about this, like about radiation. I had to learn a little bit about this. I had to update my math a little bit, because I've been 45 years out of school, so my math is not the greatest. So I had to kind of jump into that. Being a pilot helped me a little bit. It helped me. It gave me that the impetus to look forward, to look further, and to go further into that. But you did open my eyes to some other possibilities, and I would like you to sort of expand on that a little bit, because it shows the depth of the book here. The book is 313 pages. Was that
313? 13 is
Yeah.
a number that pushes you to the next level, or lucky number 7.
There you
And
go.
I don't think there's any accidents, because I would say my strongest influence is mythology and Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and everything we do is a hero's journey. And this book is a hero's journey. If the characters don't change, there's no point. So, and as I was writing it, I kept thinking of, as I researched, I wanted to do the second one, because I have so much more background on the evildoers. But why are they evil? Nobody is all evil without a reason, and evil comes from trauma. So that's always interesting in a antagonist, is why they're the way they are, and how far are we away from that ourselves? How close is our shadow?
That's a very good point. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say, Robin, that specifically, I've been on this journey for 20 plus years, and you've been on this journey, I think, for longer. And you have, even though you say you don't have the technical ability in terms of the Apollo missions, but you have a lot of technical ability, and I think a great talent for looking at history and saying, no, wait a minute, there's that can be interpreted in many different ways. You have to go a little bit deeper. You have to go a little bit further. And I think and I think you will agree with me on this, I think the last 4 years, specifically the last 4 years, I think really opened people's eyes. I mean, I have never seen such anger among people out there, including my family, my friends, my next door neighbors. I have never seen this level of anger towards governments that I'm seeing now, and I like it. And it's not a violent anger. It's not like, hey, we got to go out and we got to be anarchists. That's not what they're saying. They're just like, they're not trusting politicians anymore. They're not trusting the mainstream media. The mainstream media here in Canada is decimated. Just recently, the Trudeau government, they had given millions of dollars to their state-run media network, and other networks as well, like CBC and CTV. They just laid off CTV, which is owned by Bell Media. See, this is the thing. And this is where we get into in this book, and Robin really gave me the opportunity to actually look into that part, is that the media is run by 6 major corporations in North America, owned and run. Bell Media is one of the biggest corporations up here in Canada, and Bell Media has its hands in a lot of things, including the media, the huge media conglomerate. They just laid off 5,000 people. Their ratings are so low, and they're not getting the advertising dollars, and they're having to lay off people. And that just happened this week. And we had a chance, Robin, we had a chance to explore that in the book. And it just seemed to be, it's almost as if the universe was guiding us to go in that direction. And I'm not saying, people, this is cosmic or anything like that. I just said, it's a book, it's fiction, but we did try to base it as much as possible on reality, on some truths. And this is what I think, Robin, in your book and the way the characters, if I could say it this way, the way you develop the characters kind of mirrors what I have just been saying and what you have been saying in terms of the anger and the distrust. I mean, look at Europe. Europe has exploded. I mean, it's incredible. It's really it's inspiring. And I think we wrote the book at the right time. Would you agree?
Yes, it came out exactly when it should have.
Yeah, exactly. Just the way you, and you know what? I want to talk about something else in here. When we're talking about the page numbers, 313, and I like your analysis of that, Robin. That was brilliant. That actually came by pure accident. When we had written the book, I was writing the journal part in a different typeface, a different font. And when I got a copy of the book, this is the second copy. The first copy, I didn't like the way the font looked on paper. It was too bold and it was squished together. Some of the words were sort of going into each other. So I said, no, I got to change the font. So I went back over the journal part. I changed the font, and that increased the page number to 313. I think it was like 308. It went up by accident. It went up to 313. It turns out, as Robin said earlier in a video, she can explain it better than I do. Robin, that leads me to a question for you. Numbers seem to be a very important part of our existence. It seems to be very important, not just for us, but for the people that are creating havoc, like in the last 4 years. And if I can elaborate, like with the lockdowns, right? And with the I don't want to say we got to be careful about how we speak here, because YouTube's very but the thing in the arm about that, and about a lot of people that had their lives destroyed based on government edicts at the time, right? So I want to ask you, are you seeing that now in general yourself? Like you're seeing a sort of a consciousness rising, if I can put it that way, because that really mirrors a lot of what we got into in the book.
Well, absolutely. The last 4 years have been in what Joseph Campbell would say an initiation. It's a walking through another door, because you can't hold still. So either you go through the door, and the guardian at the threshold right now would be authority. Do you trust authority?
Yeah.
Well, you have to become sovereign at this point, and it's a test. And if you didn't become sovereign, you could end up with problems from listening to authority, let's just say. So that's what the test is right now. And people either pass it or they don't. If you don't pass it, you go backward, which we can see. Like if we didn't stand up to the government, what would happen? We would go backwards and have more shutdowns and more, it would just tighten the grip. So
and that's kind of to how the book sort of evolves, not specifically about that, but we actually do mention that because the time frame of the book goes from, of course, back to 1969 with the first Apollo moon mission. Why we start from the 60s and we work our way up to where we are at present time. And the reason why we did that too, Robin, as Robin and I discussed, we wanted to be able to get into some of what is going on now. Now, the journal itself doesn't touch on that, but Robin's text is in today's time zone, if I can put it that way, time zone. Present. Thank you very much. You see, this is how Robin helps me. Without Robin, I would not have been able to write this book. But so in the present time. So Robin's actually writing the present time. The journal's going back 50 years. Now, we left the book open because we are now discussing the possibility of a part 2. We're going to wait a little while. I want the book to percolate. I want people to, I want to get people's feedback on it. But some of the areas, Robin, that you went down in the book were quite intriguing, and it actually was opening my eyes to some new possibilities too, more specifically regarding the family, that this powerful family that is determined to get that journal back because it can destroy them if that truth gets out. And I'd like you to just expand briefly on the idea you got from that and the background and the history involved, because I found that a very, like, there are many layers in the book, and that's what when I just in your draft alone, not mine, I'm talking about your draft in the book, there's very many layers in there. And I'd like it just to explain to the viewers how you came up with that idea, that concept of this family's background.
Well, it's more constant listening, constant reading, a lifetime of reading to, I don't know, the characters just take on whatever has been rolling around in your mind. And it's like you have an archetype, and then you give them names, like Victoria in here. She's the ultimate bad guy, but she doesn't think she is. She's just doing what is necessary in her life, the way she's been raised, to continue on and be loyal to her family. And that's kind of a good thing, we would think. But how close is our shadow? Where did she take a wrong turn? Or is she taking a wrong turn? So I like to give a full character so that we understand them. I don't know how to explain her much, but she's interesting.
Yeah, no, she is. And I want to elaborate a little bit more on that, because Victoria is how shall we say, for the best way to put it, is the villain in the story. But she's not just your run-of-the-mill villain. This woman is gorgeous. This woman is a beauty. She is, but underneath that beauty, that veneer, is darkness, very deep level of darkness. But there was a few kind of comical moments in the book when your character Victoria it finds out quite by accident that she's a sociopath, and she didn't realize that. And I was laughing when somebody pointed out to her. She goes, "Oh, I think they're right, right?" And she doesn't have any feelings. And I also want you, Robin, please, I want you to get into just a little bit, because I know it's an in-depth subject, and we could talk about this for hours. I'm going to wait for your next book to come out, and I want to let the reader know about that, the reader and the viewer here. But I also want you to elaborate a little bit on the idea of her background, her lineage, her history, her family's history, because that's starting to surface now a little bit in general in the public arena, in the sense that, we're looking at these powerful people and we're saying, you know what, you're either not human, you're not from this planet, or you're strange. There's just something going on here. Like, people are questioning this now, right? So if you can elaborate just on that background part, where you got the idea of her lineage going back, like, what, I don't know, is it like hundreds of years or thousands of years? That I found very intriguing.
Well, I'm going to link her to what we would call the Anunnaki that came 6,000 years ago, because I find that seems to be a source of our troubles. Like, humankind was not having wars previously. Well, they were having wars, but it's not our nature. So what happened, and why are they so prevalent? Who are they? Why are they doing what they're doing? And it has to be life and death for them. And what is their character inside? Like, do they have a soul? So I find all that interesting. And it's becoming such a big deal now, like people like Cliff High talking about the Elohim. So I disagree with him that he says they're all evil. I say that some fell and some didn't. So nothing is all one way or the other. And we have to explore that, like humans, we're not all good, we're not all bad. And then there's varying degrees in between. So could there be gods that fell? The Bible talks about fallen angels. So is her lineage one of those, the fallen angel? And it gives me a chance to explore who and what they are and what they want. And you always have to ask what people want. If you've got the whole Space Brothers, we love you, you're younger brothers, and we're here to help. And that sounds a bit like the government. Somebody that comes here and they say, we have no motivation, we don't want anything, we're just here to help. I question that. If it's not a give and take, then who are you and what do you really want? Because that's narcissistic behavior when you're saying, oh no, I just want to help.
That's such a good point. We have Trudeau up here in Canada, and he's constantly saying, we want to keep Canadians safe, to keep Canadians safe. I mean, he says it over and over and over. And of course, you have to flip it. He actually means the opposite. And I'm using him as an example because he's now not only the most hated prime minister in the country, but he's hated around the world. And but he uses these talking points. And it's just interesting you said that. We want to keep people safe. We're doing it for your own good. Well, that sounds an awful lot like Nazism to me. We're doing it for your own good. You're no longer allowed to have autonomy on what choices you make. We will do it for you, right? And but I want to back up a bit because something you mentioned earlier, and I found that very intriguing. And I've got some books on it I'm going to be looking into on this because I am working on another project for another book. But you mentioned the Anunnaki and you mentioned the angels coming down from the sky. Now, we get that in the Old Testament, the Bible, the Old Testament. And what if you were to take that literally, take those words literally, and there would be no, for an average person on the ground watching this several thousand years ago, they can interpret that no other way, but it's a God, an angel from heaven. When it's actually it's a spaceship. It's alien technology that they're actually seeing. But because in their primitive minds back then, and I'm not by any means criticizing them for having primitive mind, because 1,000 years from now, our minds will be primitive too, to those people looking back on us. But they would have no other explanation to just say this is God, and that and would make them susceptible to control. Am I right?
Yes, if you don't know your history, somebody can tell it to you. But I say if Atlantis sank 10, 11,000 years ago, well, the people that did the sinking, if it was a worldwide society, couldn't they have saved some of their technology underground? And what if they waited about 6,000 years to gather themselves up again and then brought it out and said, look, we're from the sky. And they're not. They're just from under the ocean or wherever, but they're now fooling us. And we fell for it because we don't have a memory because of the trauma we suffered with whatever happened during Atlantis. So maybe they aren't from the sky. And that makes more sense anyway, like popping up from underground.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense for somebody to say, oh, I'm flying around the universe and I saw you guys and I need some gold. Oh, okay, sure. And what did the Spaniards say to the Aztecs? Where's your gold?
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I'm talking about. When I was reading your text, I mean, it just was opening so many other avenues, right? And in terms of our history. And now we tie this back in with the Apollo moon missions because the Apollo moon missions, and we get into this in the book because the character himself, the astronaut, starts questioning what the hell is really going on here. And he starts looking and he's finding this out for the first time. Like he finds out that, everything's not right. What's going on here? And I won't give too much away here, but he starts questioning not only, what are we doing with this program, the Apollo Moon program, but what is our reality all about? Like, where are we going? And what is really happening? And it's interesting too, because the time frame in which he's writing his journal is in the 1960s. And the 1960s is looked upon as a very turbulent time in American history. I would argue now that it's actually more turbulent today than it was back then. That was the starting point, right?
Definitely.
But yeah, and it's interesting because we're like he's questioning everything. He's questioning himself. He's finding out things about the Apollo program that is very disturbing to him. And he's now going to be the first man that landed on the moon. And he's looking at all of this and he realizes that he's being followed everywhere, by FBI, CIA. He doesn't know who's following him half the time. And they're doing that to all of the astronauts involved in the Apollo program. And one of the things that came out in this, and I'd like to mention this, Robin, because it kind of gets into history in terms of the way you put it, is that he finds out that many of the astronauts he's associated with, specifically in the Apollo program, are Freemasons. And he wasn't really sure what that was all about. And he's now beginning to find out that he is, he's mingling with a lot of people who take orders from the Freemasonry Society first. And these are all military men, and the military second. Like, he's finding out for the first time that there's a force more powerful than the military, and all of the people involved, most of them, that is, in the Apollo missions were military men, and most of them were Freemasons. And I found that very interesting too. And that kind of ties in a little bit with what you're saying, because these how can I put it, occult societies kind of developed from, the Anunnaki coming down and then making their influence known, and fractionalizing, if I can put it that way, humanity in order to better control it. They needed this for something. They still do. That's now falling apart. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I sort of sense that was sort of the direction you were going into, or at least looking into. Am I right?
That's right. Where did they come from? I still don't think that they came down from anywhere necessarily. Yeah. Maybe I just think that they hid out and waited for a good time. And I'm studying anthroposophy, the study of spirit. And one of the things Rudolf Steiner says is that when a sun changes, people who aren't here for the change and born into it, if they did come from somewhere else, they wouldn't be able to stand the sun. They would have to stay underground. They would have pale skin. The sun would melt them just like a vampire. So I love to question all these things.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Was it Bram Stoker who wrote the vampire series? I wonder if he actually got that idea from there. I wonder if that's actually based on reality.
You have to ask.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept. Robin, a couple of more points I just want to touch on before we wrap up. It's you're right. When I say the Anunnaki coming down, not necessarily saying they're coming down from space. They're coming up from underground and then giving the appearance that they're coming down from space. And it's a controlling factor for humanity back then. There's quite a rabbit hole there to go down. But I think we're not going to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think we're open to the idea of doing a part 2. The part 2 will bring us up to the present time, and we can go forward from that. That's how we designed the book, and I think we're looking in that direction, if I can put it that way. And also, for the Apollo Moon Hoax crowd out there, it's very interesting that the NASA was supposed to have landed a man on the moon in 2024. That's now being pushed back to 2026, just as we all predicted 2 years ago that they will find a reason to cancel. So I think the book is perfect timing. Robin, we can talk more and more about this, and we will continue to make videos on this. I know that you've got to wrap up soon. You've got another appointment there to go to, but is there anything else you want to say to the viewers before we wrap up here?
No, just I'm really happy that you decided to do the book with me, because it was really fun to do. And I didn't have to do a lot of research on technical, because that would have slowed me down if it wouldn't have stopped me altogether.
Well, you know what? Whatever the formula was, it worked. It really worked, because it really opened my eyes from your point of view and the knowledge that you have, and you have an incredible amount of knowledge. And I am looking forward to writing book 2, because I think we have so many other rabbit holes to go down. And so we're definitely going to have you back interviews over the next several months, and we'll be discussing this more and more and more. But anyway, just want everybody to know that the book is now available on Amazon.com, and we'll put a link down below in the video here. And I will have Robin back. Just love that intro music, Robin. I just love you. You can rock. I've noticed you've got one song on there. You can rock. What is that song I like? Take Me for a Ride. I really, really, you can rock. That gets right up there. So yeah, I'm plugging Robin, but she's worth it, huh? But anyway, Robin, thank you so much for for being on, and we'll continue this conversation in the next video. To my viewers out there, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to get more videos out in the future, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in, and I'll see you on in the next video. Bye for now.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Bye.
Hold on. Bye-bye. Thank you, Robin.
Your love's just like a wrecking ball going back and forth in a line from